Before the screams, before the suits, before Beatlemania rewrote pop culture forever, there was a sound so fragile it nearly vanished. A crackling acetate, one microphone, 5 nervous teenagers in a tiny Liverpool studio, cutting a song straight onto a disc, knowing they'd get only one chance. That recording wasn't just the Beatles' first step into history. It was the moment the Beatles truly began. Long before the Lennon-McCartney partnership became legend, before the band even carried the name The Beatles, this raw session captured the first ever recording featuring the group's core architects, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. And hidden inside that brittle groove was something even more extraordinary. The only song ever officially credited to Paul McCartney and George Harrison alone, a track that would remain virtually unknown for decades. This is the story of In Spite of All the Danger. In the summer of 1958, the Quarrymen, a scrappy Liverpool skiffle band, walked into Phillips sound recording service in Kensington. The room was small, the equipment was basic, the stakes felt enormous. Leading the group was John Lennon, alongside Paul McCartney, George Harrison, pianist John Duff Lowe, and drummer Colin Hanton.
Beatles, this was John, George, and myself, and a couple other guys, a pianist called Duff and Colin, the drummer. And we went down to a little studio in Kensington in Liverpool, and we paid £1 each to make this little shellac recording.
No second takes, no studio polish, just youth, ambition, and the faint hum of history being born.
Percy Phillips, a self-taught engineer, ran the recording studio in the middle room of his Victorian terrace house. He had an electrical goods shop in the front, and at the back was the family home. The recording cost the group 17 shillings and 3 pence and was pressed directly onto a 10-inch aluminum and acetate disc to be played at 78 revolutions per minute.
First thing we ever recorded was That'll Be the Day, Buddy Holly song, and one of Paul's called In Spite of All the Danger.
The studio logbook recorded the session simply as Skiffle 10-inch double-sided direct. In the book, The Complete Beatles Recording Sessions by Mark Lewisohn, Paul McCartney recalls the session. We waited in the little waiting room outside while somebody else made their demo, and then it was our turn. We just went into the room, hardly saw the fella because he was next door in a little control booth. We ran through it very quickly, quarter of an hour, and it was all over. The moment has been immortalized in the film Nowhere Boy, a 2009 biopic of John Lennon's youth.
John sang the lead voice, channeling Elvis, while Paul harmonized.
George played the opening guitar in the solo that would put him in the song credits. Just 3 days later, Lennon's mother, Julia, would be killed in a road accident. A detail that, in retrospect, gives this moment an almost unbearable emotional weight. In Spite of All the Danger is unique in the Beatles' catalog for one remarkable reason. It's the only song credited solely to McCartney-Harrison. This unlikely partnership is better understood in the context of the early years of their friendship. Paul and George had known each other for some time before George was introduced to John and to the Quarrymen.
George and I lived very near each other in Liverpool. So, in fact, we were just a bus stop away from each other.
They shared their passion for music, for guitars and chords. In fact, the B7 chord, In Spite of All the Danger, may have come from what Paul has described as a musical goose chase, where he and George tried to learn new chords in the early years.
Sometimes we'd travel the whole of Liverpool just to go to someone who knew a chord we didn't know. Remember once hearing about a bloke who knew B7. We didn't know B7, that was kind of the missing part of the link, the other chord, the lost chord. So we got on the bus, trooped across Liverpool, changed a couple of...
Even in those early days, the control was already there.
Although the song credit is shared, Paul has always claimed the song as his.
So just dum, 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 B7. We learned it off him, got back on the bus, went home to our mates and went.
It says on the label that it was me and George, Paul later explained, but I think it was actually written by me, and George played the guitar solo. They were mates, he said, and nobody was thinking about copyrights or publishing. Nobody really understood it yet. Pianist John Duff Lowe remembers it clearly. Even during rehearsals at his house on Forthland Road, Paul was very specific about how he wanted the song played and exactly what the piano should do. There was no room for improvisation. Everyone was told precisely what to play. Even then, there was a surprising amount of arranging going on. Paul has also admitted the song was heavily inspired by Elvis. "It's very similar to an Elvis song," he said. "It's me doing an Elvis." Most commentators agree that the Presley track McCartney used as a model was Trying to Get to You. When the session ended, the band was left with just one copy of the recording, and the plan was simple but risky. Each band member would keep it for 1 week.
So I had it for a week, John had it for a week, George had it for a week.
Passing the fragile disc around like a secret they couldn't afford to lose. While history thundered forward, one fragile disc stayed perfectly still. As that acetate sat quietly in Duff Lowe's possession, the world moved on. The Quarrymen became the Beatles. They crossed the Channel and survived Hamburg. They sharpened their sound at the Cavern. Brian Epstein entered the picture. Ringo joined. A record contract followed, then a first #1. They conquered Britain, then America, then the world. Beatlemania erupted. They stopped touring and retreated into the studio, where they made history again and again, reshaping popular music and culture itself. And then, suddenly, it was over. Through all of it, fame, revolution, heartbreak, that small 1958 acetate still existed, unchanged, quietly preserving the exact moment where everything began. By 1981, Duff Lowe had cherished the disc for 28 years and began considering an auction. Paul McCartney stepped in and chose to buy it himself. A private agreement was reached, the sum never disclosed. The lost recording had finally come home. Paul had engineers restore the sound and pressed roughly 50 copies, which he gave as personal gifts to family and close friends, including George and Ringo. In 2004, Record Collector magazine named the original acetate the most valuable record in existence, valuing it at £100,000, with Paul's 1981 copies ranked second at £10,000 each. By 2023, those figures had doubled. The wider world finally heard the song when it appeared on Anthology 1 in 1995, the first official Beatles release to credit a song to McCartney and Harrison. Then, in 2005, Paul McCartney did something remarkable. He brought In Spite of All the Danger back to stadiums and arenas, performing it for tens of thousands.
We were just a young band trying to get noticed. So we wanted to make a demo record. And this song is the first song that we ever recorded. In spite of all the pain.
A song written by a 14 or 15-year-old boy, now sung by a man in his 80s. What began as a teenage experiment became an emotional bridge stretched across an entire lifetime.